I'll minify that. Okay, so let's keep talking about jQuery. We'll talk about a couple more advanced topics. All right, so let's go to jQuery CS4550 experiments jQuery. There we go. So that was the first couple experiments. We did 7 experiments on Tuesday. Let's keep working here, right? So let's stop this and let's create a couple more experiments. Let's see, we stopped at 007. Let's create a new one. We'll say add HTML 010 HTML. How's that? Okay. And so we talked about jQuery last time. Let's talk a little bit about jQuery UI. Okay. So let's call this jQuery UI. Right. Let's do H1 jQuery UI, and let's go back to downloading jQuery. Let's see, where were we? We go to jQuery.com. We see that we can download jQuery. We can also download jQuery UI. Right? If we click on one of these icons, right, we see that there are a lot of widgets here that are very useful to develop web applications. There's some interactions that you can implement, such as dragging, be able to drag things around the screen, drop elements on top of others, resize elements. So let's download jQuery UI, and I'll download it here in Downloads. I'll say Save, and then I'll open it. I'll open it with I open the zip file. Let's see what we want here. Let's this is jQuery. Where is jQuery? Wait a minute. Do we download jQuery already? External jQuery. Oh, there's jQuery JS. What else is here? Let's see. We have images. All right. So let's capture this. Let's capture that. And let's copy those things into our directory where we have our development environment. We have it in the extensions file. We have it under CS4500 experiments. I believe we were putting everything under here, under jQuery, right? So let's create a couple of directories where we can drop that in there. So let me create here JS. We're going to put the JS part. The CSS part, I'm going to put it in a separate CSS folder. Let's say new CSS, and in there I'm going to put the jQuery CSS. What else do we need? Let's see. We need we might need the images, so let's copy the images. We'll put it here, and we'll copy also the jQuery file. We'll put it under JS. Okay, so we have locally. Remember that last time on Tuesday we linked, right? We linked using the script tag saying the source is we downloaded from the CDN. Remember that? Right. That's what we did on Tuesday. Today we're going to take another approach, right? If you're developing, it might be a good idea to just have a copy of these libraries locally on your file system. You know, just in case you don't have connections to the internet, right? And you want to keep developing. That happens to me quite often. I'm developing on the train, you know, as I come in or I leave, and I don't have a steady network connection, but I still have copies of those libraries locally, right? So let's link to them locally. Let's go to jQuery, and from 010 HTML, let's see that we have it. Let's see, jQuery. We need to refresh, right? There we are. There's the CSS, there's the images and the JS, right, that we just copied in there. You see that, right? And in here, we're going to start playing around with jQuery UI. jQuery UI. All right, to play around with that, we're going to have to load those libraries. Let's load the libraries. Let's see. We have the CSS, right? rel. It's a style sheet. And we have some CSS which we just downloaded. We're going to link it. Right there it is, jQuery UI, and there we go. And we're going to load jQuery first. To be able to use jQuery UI, you need to load jQuery first, right? And then you load jQuery UI. jQuery UI is basically an extension on jQuery that introduces all sorts of widgets, all sorts of ways to interact, animation, and so on and so forth. So let's load first jQuery. Source is inside of JS, and it's inside of jQuery. There it is. Okay, so there we go. We got jQuery. Let's make sure that jQuery is alive and well. Let's create a little hello world, right? And we're going to say, let's see, we're going to say console log hello from jQuery. Right? So let's run this, see that make sure that jQuery is downloaded and installed. Let's inspect. There it is. In the console, it is saying hello from jQuery, right? So jQuery is installed, right? And when the document loaded, it fired this this function, this anonymous function, this anonymous function here. It got invoked when the document finished loading. All right, so we have jQuery installed. Let's load jQuery UI right after loading jQuery, right? Let's load jQuery UI, source JS, and there's jQuery UI. Here we go. All right, we have jQuery UI. All right, let's see what we could do with jQuery UI, right? You can take a look at the various examples that they have, right? Let's look at the draggable example. The draggable example allows you to grab anything on the DOM, right? Any element in the DOM and make it draggable, right? Normally, nothing is draggable, right? None of this is draggable. You can click and drag all you want, but nothing is draggable, right? But you can enable dragging capabilities, like over here, for instance, I can drag this div, right? By using jQuery UI, right? The way you do that is very easy. You grab a hold of the div or whatever element it is, paragraphs, H1s, anything. Right? You can make anything draggable. Right? You grab it using jQuery. You can look at the source. Let's look at the source. All right. So for instance, you have this div. It's a very simple div, right? It has an ID. It could be a class. It could be anything, right? Something that identifies this particular div. And then from within your script, you just you grab it using jQuery. There it is, right? You're grabbing the DOM element, and then you invoke the draggable function on it. And that's it. It's draggable. All right, so let's play around with it. Let's see. What about this H1 right now? This H1 right now is not draggable, right? If I try to click it, right, it's just, you can select the text, right? But you can't drag it, right? You can't drag it. So to make it draggable, what we can do is grab a hold of that H1. How do we grab a hold? We can just say $H1. That grabs all H1 elements, yes? But there's only one, so we're grabbing this one. And to make it draggable, you can just call draggable. That's it. All right, let's try it again. Let's reload the page, right? And now it's draggable. Okay. Wherever I put it, there it stays. Yes, right? If I refresh, obviously it goes back to where it was, right? It's not persistent, right? The movement of this element is not persistent. Okay, make sense? But I can drag it. If I have lots of H1s, say I have several H1s, right? Lots of them, a lot of H1s. They are all draggable, right? Everything's draggable. Right? Because, again, it grabs all H1s and then it applies that behavior to all the elements that were detected. Make sense? Right? Or you might want to say, well, only the ones, you can assign a class, right? Say a class EWQ, whatever, right? Whatever. And then you can be very specific. You can say, oh, well, I want only the ones that is H1, but has the whatever class, and then now only that one is draggable, right? This one's not draggable, right? I can't drag that one, but I did put the whatever class on that, right? I can be a little more specific, use a much a better name for this, right? I can maybe say drag me. I can give it a more specific name and a more semantic name, drag me, right? So now this one is draggable. And anyone that so now I can paint and say anything that I apply that class to, anything that I apply that class to is draggable, right? If I refresh, now this is draggable and that one is draggable, but the other ones are not, right? The other ones are not. Make sense? Everybody okay? So I can apply it to H1s. I can apply it to paragraphs. So here's I have a paragraph. Yeah, say that this is draggable. This is drag me, right? And we can have some content here. Load an ipsum. Just copy some content real quick. This is a paragraph, and the paragraph is, oh, I thought it was draggable. Drag me. It is drag me. What did I do? Oh, I said h1.drag me, right? I can be a little less specific and say anything that has the drag me class is draggable, right? So if I refresh now, the paragraph is draggable, right? So I could have paragraphs that are draggable and paragraphs that are not draggable. Right? For instance, this paragraph is not, right? And then this one is. So some of them are, some of them aren't, right? So this one I can drag. This one I cannot. Yes. And this one.
Click and drag the white space that's in line with the H1 or paragraph element, but it's still dragged.
What do you mean?
Like you have the click unit header for H1, and if you click the white space on the right, it's still dragged.
Oh yes, because these are block elements, right? So block elements take up the entire width of the page, right? So yeah, so it would be draggable, right? It takes up the entire width and then it wraps, right? Block elements. If they are inline elements, then no, right? Only that little piece that is taking up the space of whatever content it's inside. Okay, so images, for instance, only the image would be draggable, right? Nothing around it would be draggable, right? Spans, things like that, right? Anchors, things that are inline, only that element. But block elements, yes, the entire horizontal space, right? Unless you say display inline, then it becomes an inline, right? All right, so everybody okay with dragging? Makes sense? All right, let's, yes.
Can you just go back to the script part?
Yep. Right, this is saying grab everything that has a class drag me, right, and apply this behavior. Okay. All right, everybody okay? All right. I'm just going to rename the experiments. The experiment, I'm going to call it jQuery UI draggable. Just so that and jQuery UI, and I'm going to rename the file, the experiment over here, jQuery UI draggable. Oops, sorry. Draggable. There we go. All right, so let's copy that and let's do another experiment. 011. The other one that I find also very, very useful is sortable. I think this is one of the most useful behaviors, right? In that are available in jQuery, right? So I'm going to say jQuery UI sortable. Okay, and sortable, the way it works is that sort me. And this is sortable, sortable. The way sortable works is that you can have a UL, right, an unordered list or any list, right, and then the elements inside, right, where you might have a piece of text. You might have a piece of text here. Oops. You might have several elements in that UL, right? And let's load it. Let's run this, right? Let's run it. So you have a UL, right? Several ULs, and by saying that I want this UL to be sortable, right? I can say class sort me, right? So notice that I am associating this class to this UL. I am grabbing it from jQuery. In jQuery, I'm saying grab that UL that has the class sort me and make it sortable. Make it sortable, right? Now, if I refresh, you'll notice that the elements, see that? I can move them around, right? And I can reposition them. Notice that the space, everything else is moving away, right? For me to be able to drop the element in another position. That makes sense? Right? I guess it would make sense if the elements would be different, right? Say I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7. How's that? There we go. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, right? I can bring the second one down, right, and drop it here in this position. You see that? I can bring 7 all the way to the top. See that? That's very, very useful. Right. Now you usually all of these draggable and sortable and all of them, they can be configured, right, so that they behave. This is the default behavior, right, for sortable. This is the default behavior, but you can configure the behavior. For instance, one of the things that I might want to do is that as I am moving it, because I can only sort and position it vertically, right? It'd be nice that I shouldn't be able to move it horizontally, right? That's something that I would like to be configure. Well, jQuery allows you to do that. Let's look at the API. If you go to sortable, right, it gives you several examples, right, of moving items around, right, and it gives you several examples that I definitely encourage you to go through these, right, and see. Many different examples. You can look at the source, how they implemented it, which is basically what we have, right? But you can go to the API documentation here as well, and it says all the things that you can configure. All the things that you can configure. One of the things that you can configure is the axes, right? You know, as you're moving things around, you are moving things on the y-axis and the x-axis, right? Well, you can configure and say, I only want to be able to move in the y-axis, not the x-axis, right? So so you can configure that. You can go, here are the options. You go to the options and it says, okay, you can configure x and y. You can say, which axes do you want to be able to move and sort these around? So you can configure and say, and provide a JSON, an object, a JavaScript object with several options, right? I can say axis being the property and x being the value, right? It's an object. It's an object literal that we talked about on Tuesday, right? We talked about JSONs, right? That were name value pairs. Well, this is an object that has one value. I mean, one name value pair, right? Axis x. If I save that and I reload my page, close this. Right, if I reload my page now, notice that, oh, what did I say? X? That makes no sense, right? It should be Y, right? Notice that it's doing what it's supposed to, right? Notice it's only letting me move it right and left. It's not letting me move it up and down, right? I hate computers. They do exactly what they're told. Okay, I'm going to change it to Y, right? That makes more sense, right? Let's refresh. And yes, now I can only move it up and down. I can't move it left and right, right? That makes sense, right? Sorry. And there's tons of other configurations that I invite you to take a look at. Other things that you can configure is events, right? For instance, you can request to be notified, right? Programmatically, you can be notified. What position were you and what new position are you in now, right? That's useful, right? Because typically, all that information you need to be able to store it somewhere, right? You need to be able to send it back to the server because you need to remember these things, right? You need to store it in some kind of database. So all that information you need to be able to store it somewhere, right? Anyway, so definitely I encourage you to become familiar, at least familiar with the structure of the documentation, so that if you want, if you want to go and find out how to do something, you can look it up. All right. I hope that's the biggest lesson you come up with from this course is that you should consider that anything is possible, right? If you can dream it, there probably is a library to do it, and that I encourage you to to be able to find, right, to keep looking, to keep learning on your own. I'm just showing you the tippy top of what's possible. Okay. Let's see, what else? We have we looked at sortable. Another one that is very interesting is resizable. All right, let's look at resizable. Let me copy this. Stop this. And sortable, I'm just going to copy paste, and I'll name it 012 resizable. Okay, and resizable. Again, here we have let's see, this class over here. Instead of a drag me, resize me, we'll call it. How's that? And resize me, we're going to grab it, and instead of doing sortable, we're going to apply resizable. Resizable, right? And guess what it does? It makes things that so you can move them around. You can resize them, right? So resize me. There we go. There's resize me. Let's run that. Okay. And was it this one? Okay. Notice that I can move it around, right? I can resize it. Where is it? I can resize it from the corner, right? And make it smaller, right? I guess it would help if I make the change the color a little bit, right? So I can change maybe the style, right? And say style of things that are resizable. Dot resize me. I'm going to say that has a background color. Background color maybe beige. How's that? So if I resize, so this paragraph is resizable, and I can notice that I get handlebars at the bottom, at the right, and at the corner. Right, that's the default. Right, you do not get handlebars on the top and the left. But guess what? That's configurable. Right, I can configure that I want handlebars everywhere. Right, all around. Okay. So I can resize it, right? I can resize the paragraph. And not only can I make it resizable, I can combine these things. I can say that not only are you resizable, you are also draggable. You're both. You're resizable and draggable. Okay, so that's cool, right? I can refresh this and start resizing this. I can resize it, but I can also start moving it around. All right? So you could imagine that this could be the beginning of some kind of painting program, or some drawing program where you can do rectangles and and diagramming, right? This could be the beginnings of like a WYSIWYG editor, right? Where you can drag things around and say, oh, I want this content here, this content there, right? Perhaps I'd like to be able to push a button and add more content, and then I can drag it and put it into place, right? Right, so this is like the beginning, might be the beginning of some kind of IDE, right? Or some kind of developer environment. Okay, makes sense, right? And again, there's tons and tons of really cool things that you can play around with. I encourage you to play around with these things. There's date pickers, right? Obviously date pickers, right? There's time pickers. There's dialog boxes, right? That you can drag around dialog boxes. There's autocomplete, so that as you type, it provides a look ahead, right? And you can select. There's tons of widgets that I definitely encourage you to play around with. Okay? jQuery UI. All right, so let's move on. I want to talk a little bit about event handling, right? Meaning, for instance, one of the things I like to be able to do is that right now the content is static, right? But maybe I would want to have the ability to add content dynamically, right? So for instance, let's see, I would like to be able to react as users click here, click there, drag this, right? I want to be able to react to events, right? So let's look at a very simple example of an event handler, right? And the simplest of events is the click event, right? I like to be able to listen and maybe run some application or some function when people click on something, right? So let's do something. Let's see. Let's add an HTML page. Let's call it 012. Let's call it 020. Click. Okay. So I'll call this click event handler. And we have H1, and here's a click event handler, right? And we are going to, I guess we need the libraries, right? So let's copy the libraries. There we go. All right, so in our little application, what we want to do, let's run this first. So there it is. There's H1, and obviously right now nothing happens if I click on it. I can make anything clickable, right? With jQuery, I can listen in for anything that is clicked. I can react to any gesture that the user does as they interact with the user interface, right? Right now we have not only do we have the mouse to be able to interact with our tablets, now we have our fingers too, right? So our gestures have expanded quite a bit since we've moved into tablets and mobiles and things are portables, right? But let's look at some of the classical ways to interact with this. Okay, let's create a little script here. Okay. All right. So one of the things that I want to do is grab a hold of the H1, right? Let's grab a hold of the H1, that one H1 there, right? So I have it. And obviously I can do whatever I want with it, right? I can change the background color to yellow, obviously, right? We saw how to do that last class. Yeah, so it's working, right? We do have control over the DOM, right? We do have control of the DOM. Things that I would like to be able to do, not only just make it look pretty or ugly, I would like to listen for an event, right? And the way we do that in jQuery is we have several methods here that would allow us to create event handlers. One of them is click. Here it is, click, right? There's another one called double click. I would like to be able to listen to either one, right? If you're clicking or double clicking. So let's try click, the simplest one, just click. Now, click is a method that takes as an argument a function to be called when indeed you click on this, right? Whenever you click on what? On H1. Notice that click is being applied to H1, right? If it takes no argument, then click generates a click event as if you would have clicked it. But instead of you clicking it with the mouse, you are programmatically clicking. Make sense? Right? So you can generate events of clicking, double clicks, and whatnot. If this were a hyperlink that you're clicking, it would actually go and navigate to the page where that hyperlink is pointing to. Right, as if you would have clicked it with your mouse or finger. Make sense? So you can generate events, or you can listen for events. So if it takes no arguments, you generate an event. If you give it an argument, like a function, right? If you give it a function, it will call that function, right? We can have the function in here, like an anonymous function, right? But some people find that kind of weird, right? So instead, we're going to declare a function out here. We're going to say function event click handler. So click event handler. So here's my function. Okay, and I can give it the name of that function to click and say, hey, click, when H1 is clicked, I want you to invoke that function. Make sense? Everybody okay? What am I going to do in the function? Whatever I want, right? I can say, you know, alert, you know, clicked H1. Okay, right? So let's try it. Let's refresh. If I click, notice that there it is. The alert pops up. Make sense? Everybody good? Anywhere, right? If I click here, anywhere in H1, because again, it's a block, right? It takes up the entire width of the page. So anywhere that I click on the H1, it generates it. If I click anywhere else, it doesn't. But if I click on H1, it works. Everybody good? Make sense? All right. So that's the simplest of event handlers. A click. You will see in a lot of cases, you will see this instead of having the function here being declared outside, you will see it being declared right inside of the click event. Some people find that weird as a syntax, but this is perfectly fine in jQuery in JavaScript, right? Where the function is now anonymous. I don't even need the name of the function, right? Because it's just throwaway function, right? I don't intend to reuse this function, right? Only if I intend to reuse the function, then it warrants to have its own function with its own name. Yes? If it doesn't warrant, if I'm not going to reuse the function, why bother even giving a name, right? It could be just an anonymous function. Everybody okay? All right. All right. So click H1. Well, H1 could have. I could ask. Whenever this function is called, whenever the function is called, the function is invoked with an event object that is passed to the function that you give it. Okay, the event object will give you information such as exactly at what the timestamp of when you exactly clicked on it. It will give you the X and Y position of the mouse, right? It will give you the actual object that you clicked on. It'll give you tons and tons of information about what happened, right? Why this event was generated. Let's generate a console here. We're going to say console log event, right? And let's inspect this. Let's look at the console. If I click on it, notice what it generates. You see that the console is providing us with a jQuery.event object, right? That if we open it up, it has all sorts of things. Oh man, silences. Airplane mode. There we go. All right. For instance, one of the things that it says is that whether you had the Alt key pressed at the time of the click, right? So you can do a lot of gestures with Control Shift Alt, right? So you can click, you can right click, you can do all sorts of things. It tells you exactly the X and Y position of where you clicked. It gives you a timestamp of when it was generated. It tells you the actual element that was clicked, right? So you can get the original object, the original element that was actually clicked. So you can keep doing some additional manipulation. A timestamp. This is a timestamp, right? And the type of the event. It was a click as opposed to a double click or right click or drag or drop or a key press, right? Yes.
How would
how'd you go? So let's say we wanted to only make that alert pop up if you were holding shift and you clicked. How would we go about it?
Here's it is. It says shift key, right? So you can check to see, right, whether the event happened with the shift key, right? And then if it's a shift key, then you listen to it. Otherwise, you return it and don't do anything.
Okay.
Right? You know, the click event will be generated regardless, right?
Right.
You have to then filter it and decide to either ignore it or not. Okay. So yeah, one of the cool things is that we do get the original H1. That's pretty cool, because now that we have the original objects, right? We have the element that was clicked, right? The element that was clicked, I can get a hold of it, right? It's as the target. This is the event that generated it, the H1. Yes. So if I do console log the element, right, it'll say that it's the H1, right? It's that H1. Notice that if I hover over it, it tells me that it corresponds to that element on the DOM over there, right? But notice that it's a raw element. See, it's a raw element. It's not a jQuery element. It is a raw DOM element, right? That is on the page. If I want to, I can convert it back to jQuery by wrapping this again with the $. So now it becomes again a jQuery object that I can manipulate it, right? So for instance, like I can change the color, I can change all sorts of things, right? So if I refresh and I click over it, now it becomes again a jQuery object that is H1, right? And it has all sorts of functions, right, in there, right? It has I can make it draggable. I can do also all sorts of things. Now that it's a jQuery object, I can keep processing it. I can say right. I can now change its. It used to be the background was yellow, but when I click it, I want it to become red. Right. So I click on it, it becomes red. Right. Or maybe I have an X button somewhere here, right? That if I click on that X button, I wanted to remove the element from the DOM, right? So I could do element remove. Right. So if I click on it, poof, it's gone. Right. So I can make things such as I interact with things, I can add, remove. All right. So that's enough of the click element. Let's use what we've just learned, right, to manipulate the DOM. Right. Let's manipulate the DOM as we are clicking. Well, we're already manipulating a little bit, but let's do something a little more interesting. So let's see. Add DOM elements. Okay. So let's open that up and let's close everything else. Close all but this. All right. So this is adding DOM elements dynamically. Elements on click. How's that? As you click, we're going to add new elements to the DOM, right? And that's the H1. We're going to paste it here. And let's make a couple of buttons that will allow me to add things. So let's create a button here. And that says, I'll call it add. Let's see, what do we want to add? We want to add maybe a paragraph. How's that? Add paragraph. Okay. And we'll listen for this. We'll say class add paragraph. Add P. Okay. So we're gonna listen for that, right? For that button, whenever it's clicked, whenever it's clicked, we're going to say if add has a click, I want to call a function add paragraph. Okay? And so here's a function that adds the paragraph. So we can say function add paragraph. Okay? And what's it going to do? It's going to grab the body. It's going to grab the body, and it's going to add a new paragraph. Let's say append, and then a new paragraph with some content, with paragraph graph with some content. Okay, let's try it out. Where? Up. And that paragraph. That. There we go. Let's run that. Okay, so we're clicking it. So as we click, notice that we're adding content. Yes, right? Perhaps the elements as we're adding them, right? Maybe we can create the paragraph over here. Var p is equal to $, right? And we can put the HTML in here. Right, we can add the paragraph there and then say p, right? Let's see if that works. Add paragraph. So that's adding them, right? The paragraph, before I add it, maybe I want to make it draggable, right? So that as I add them, right, I can then move them around, right? I can also make them, I can also change something, which is something pretty cool that it's part of HTML5. We can say content editable is true. So I can actually edit the paragraph, right, as I add them, right? So I can add the content, and as this becomes more and more bigger and bigger and bigger, oh, I can't select because I have draggable, right? Case, right? The paragraph is too big, but I can still drag it around. I can also make it resizable, right? So not only draggable, but I can make it resizable. Right, so as I add content, right, and I edit the content. Oops, wait. Where'd it go? Here we go. Copy. Home, copy, paste. Oh, where'd it go? Oh, my goodness. Copy, paste. What's going on? What is going on? Why are you doing that? Copy, paste. That's working. Why is that one so weird? Anyway, this one you can see that I can drag it around, right? I can still resize it. Okay, this is resizable. Right, I can resize the paragraph, right? I can move it around. Okay. Let's see. One cool thing that I like to be able to do is save this somewhere, right? Maybe I could save this in a database, right? And with all the content, the XY position, right? And I have myself a little, content management system, right? That if I can store these positions, the content, right, and can put it, I can make, I can start competing with some content editing websites out there, right? So let's refresh. Okay. I can add paragraph, or maybe I can add just a little div that I can move around. Presumably, that content, notice that is being added, further down in the DOM, right? Right. So it would make no sense that after so much, notice that it's way down there. So more typical in a content management system, the content would appear maybe in the center, right? It would appear in the center, and then you can resize and put it exactly where you want it. Yes, right? So we could do that, right? We can say P, the paragraph. I can say P, I'm going to make it the position. Position, I'm going to call it its absolute. Right? I'm going to set the position absolute. I'm also going to say that the original, the starting position will be left will be 200 pixels, and the, oh wait, 200 pixels, right? And the top will also be 200 pixels. All right, so as I add it, notice that it's always in the same place, right? I can move it around, I can add it, and then I can move it around and put it somewhere else, right? Oh, notice that if I want to be able to move these things around and position them exactly one next to each other, or maybe flush, it becomes very, very hard to be very precise, yes? So one of the things that you can do in Draggable, if you go to the documentation, is that you can create a grid. Right, there is a grid. You can go to the grid and you can say, I can position my grid, you know, every 20 pixels or every 10 pixels, so that everything starts to get stuck to the grid, right? So we can copy that, and as we make it draggable, we can give it the option that the grid is maybe 20 by 20, 20 by 20 grid. And so as I add them, now notice that it moves. With the grid, I can add different paragraphs and I can move them around, right? And now I can make them flush with one another, right? And I can paste a lot of content, such as lorem ipsum. So this content, instead of being this over here, it could be something very long. I add the paragraph, there it is. I can move it around. I can position it exactly where I want. I can resize it. Right, I say I want the paragraph right there, then I want another paragraph, and I can move it around and put it maybe right next to it, right? So I have the beginnings of a page layout application, right? What's left over is being able to save this, right, either to a database, or maybe we could store it locally. How's that? Maybe we can store it locally. Let's store it locally. Let's store it locally. Okay, let's do another example, right? We're going to do, let's see, let's copy that. Let's copy this, copy paste. Stop this. It says 022 local storage. Local storage. Okay, so local storage. So local storage allows us to, you know, is everybody familiar with cookies? Or what cookies do, right? The way cookies work, it was a first attempt at fixing a very big problem with HTML. HTML, as we know, is stateless. Right? Stateless means that, you know, as you know, here's our server. Here's our server. And we might have many browsers, you know, browser 1, browser 2, right? And the browsers, as they interact with the server, you know, they're asking for content, right? And in HTML, there was no mechanism for being able to distinguish one browser from the other. Okay, the server could not tell whether the request came from one or the other. It could not maintain a conversation with any one of them, right? You know, so for instance, there was no way for me to, you know, maybe log in and say that it's me, right? And so I want to look information that is mine. I don't want to look at information that's somewhere else's, right? There was no way for the server to distinguish you from someone else. Okay, so what they came up with, the idea to solve this problem is for browsers, when they submit to the server, they provide some identity along the way, right? With a mechanism called a cookie. Okay, a cookie is just a string, right? It's an object. It's a little database here that is maintained by each browser. It's a little table that says for each domain, right? For each domain. So for domain, so this is server, right? That lives at abc.com, right? For abc.com, right? I can store several name value pairs. And every time I go to abc.com, the browser will provide this information. Okay? That information can be used by the server, by these applications on the server side, to be able to identify you and distinguish you from someone else. Okay. Another browser might have different cookies for abc.com. Right. For the same cookies, it will have different values. Okay. And that mechanism was invented to be able to maintain conversations with servers, so that servers could say, "Oh, it's you," right? So I will give you your bank information, and for this other person that's coming in, I'll give them their bank information, right? Or you have your shopping cart, and someone else has some other shopping cart, right? Right now, I need to be able to distinguish you. Right? So HTML5 came up with a much more powerful mechanism to handle this local storage. This information is being stored locally on the browser, right? Locally on the browser. HTML5 introduced a more powerful mechanism that allows us to, same thing, right? You have name-value pairs, right? But these over here are now much more powerful. You can store whole objects, right? Whole pieces of objects in here. Cookies were very restrictive on the sizes that they could be. Local storage has an ample size that you can store in there. So local storage is much more powerful. Local storage, right? And so we could use this as a little database, right? Like a very little data, as a simple database to store things about a user, right? And store it here so that when they come in next time around, we have that information stored already in the browser. Right? Very, very powerful. Let's play around with it a little bit. Let's see. All right, let's see. Let's close this. All right, one of the things we're going to do is first look at the local storage object. Oops. So this is local storage. Local storage. All right, we're going to say console. We're going to say console log local storage. All right, let me run that. And let's look at the console. Okay, there it is, storage. Right now, there's nothing stored in the local storage because we never put anything in there. Okay, we never put anything there, but we could put stuff in there. Okay, we might say we want to store. We can say to store things. We might say local storage dot set item, right? And we can give it a name to the item and then a value, name value, name value, name value. Okay, so we could say maybe first name, right? And then we can put in there Alice. Yes. And then let's I'm going to refresh the page. I'm going to refresh the page. Notice that the local storage now says that it has something in there. Well, actually, no, there's nothing in there, the length. But if we refresh, we keep refreshing, notice that next time around that I refreshed, the first name entry is in there. You see that? Right? And even if well, you might say, well, of course it's there. You're putting it there, right? But notice that if I remove this, right? If I remove the storage of the data in there and I refresh, first name is still there. I'm refreshing the page. I'm refreshing the page. Even though I'm refreshing the page, it does not remember, it does not forget that I had put that item in there. See that? Make sense? Right? It allows me to store things. Okay? Right now, it's just plain old strings. Okay? I can store other things in there. I can say, I can store an object. I can say var employee, a whole object. So I can say maybe fname Bob and last name Dylan. Right? I can set it. I can say, hey, local storage, can you please store for me this employee? Set item employee, and I'm going to put the object employee. Okay, I'm going to refresh. There we go. And now I'm going to refresh. Notice the weird way that it's storing it. See that? As a string. You see that? And the reason is that local storage can only store strings. So if I want to retrieve data, let's try and retrieve the first name. Let's try and retrieve the first name, right? So it's already there, right? So I'm going to remove this. I'm going to remove it. I can retrieve it by saying var first name. I can retrieve it by saying local storage. I know that I stored an item and I had called it first name. I can retrieve it, right? And I can print it. I can print the first name. Oops. Local storage. Get item. There it is. I know I stored Alice in there, right? There it is. What about that other item I had stored? The employee. Let's try and retrieve it. Var employee. Local storage get item. I think I called an employee, right? Is that what I called it? Employee, yeah. What we'll see is that what it's going to retrieve is not what we expect. There it is. It's a string, right? Representation of the generic object, but not the actual data, right? We lost the data because we stored it wrong. We tried to store an object. What we should have stored is the string representation of that object. Okay? Let's try and do that. Okay? Let's create the object again. Var, oh wait. Okay, the object was, I think was first name, let's put somebody else. Charlie. Last name Garcia. All right, I'm going to put that in the local storage, which says local storage dot set item employee. Okay. So what we did wrong is that, sorry, the name is employee. The name is employee. What we did wrong is to put the object right here, and what that's going to do is going to first convert this into a string representation, a generic string representation, which is the object that we saw, right? That's not what we want. What we need to do is convert that into a string, right? So let's first convert it into a string, right? So if we do a console.log employee is going to print it as an object. There it is. It's the object, right? First name, last name. But we want the string representation of that. The way we convert it into a string is to use the following. Employee, we'll put it in an employee str, right? Right, we're going to convert employee to a string. So the way we convert JSON objects to strings is as follows. We use the JSON API, JSON, all caps, right? JSON, all caps. This is API that is from the browser. The browser is providing this API, right? And you can go both ways. You can go, here's an object, give me the string representation, or here's a string representation, give me the object. You can convert them both ways. This is going to be very important when we start talking to servers, right? When we have to send objects across the wire, right? Later on next week, we're going to start passing data to the server, and that data that goes across to the server has to be in string representation, right? It cannot be an object, right? HTTP, you can only pass strings. You can't pass binary data, okay? So it has to be converted into a string representation and then passed across. Same thing, the server is also going to respond to us with a string representation. We're going to have to be, in our browser, we're going to have to be able to convert that string back into an object representation. And the way you do that is using this API, JSON dot stringify, converts it into a string. We give it the object employee, and it converts it into a string. Let's print it. Console.log employee string. Let's print it. Let's see. There it is. So this is the object. There's the object, right? And this is the string representation of that object. That is a real string. Okay? That we can store in local storage. right? Let's try storing it. Right, we're going to store the string representation. There it is. We stored it. Let's refresh. So it should be there already. Let me remove this. Let's see. We don't need any more because it's already there. Hopefully, so I'm just going to comment this out. Comment it out. So I'm not storing it anymore. But we're going to get the local storage, right? We're going to like local storage, and we're going to retrieve the employee var employee str, right, from the local storage. Oops, sorry, from the local storage. And we called it, I believe, just employee, right? And then we're going to print it. We're going to do console.log employee string. Let's refresh. There it is. This is a string representation that we retrieve from local storage, right? We would need to be able to convert it back into an object, right? Because I mean that's how we can manipulate it with JavaScript, right? When it's an object representation, a string is it's too low level, right? We need to convert it back into an object. The way we convert it back into an object is by saying employee. We use the same API from JSON, but this time we're going to go the other way around. We're not going to stringify. Right? We want to convert it back into an object. The way we do that is with parse. Parse parses the string representation, and it gives you an object representation of that object, of that string, right? So we're going to parse that string, right, and into a real object, and then we're going to print that object. We're going to print that object. Let's refresh. There it is. Now it's back, right? We have reconstituted the object from local storage. That makes sense? Did I lose anybody? Do you need me to go over this again? Right? Just local storage allows us to put strings and retrieve strings. It could be simple strings like the first name, last name, or we can do an entire object, right? But to store the entire object, we have to first convert it to a string representation, put it in there, and then we retrieve it. We need to convert it back into an object. Make sense? Yes.
Can you individually retrieve like just first name from the local storage, or do you have to do the whole?
No, you have to convert it, right? Because it's only a string, right? So it doesn't know that it's an object which is nested and it has arrays and has no notion of objects, right? It has to be strings. Okay. All right. Now that we know how to do that. Let's create another. Let's copy this. Let's create another experiment where we can store the DOM, right? As we add content, right? As we add paragraphs, as we add different things, right? I would like to store that. Yes? Right? Ideally, I would store it in the database, right? But we don't know how to do that yet, right? We need to convert this data, send it to the server. The server would store it in some table, some database, and then tomorrow when we come back, we would read it from the database and reconstitute all our data. Yes. Over here right now, we have a little database that only lives on the browser, right? Which is called local storage. So let's play around with that. So we'll have here 023. And we're going to say so store. This is what it means. Add to local storage. Add DOM to local storage. Local storage. Okay. All right. So this is called add DOM to local storage. All right. Let's see. All right. We don't need any of this. We don't need any of that. What do we want to do? We want that button, right? That says button add paragraph. Right? And as a click on this, class add paragraph, right? As I click on that, we would like to add things to the paragraph. Right? We're going to say that click, and as I click on it, I'm going to call the method add paragraph. Right, and the function is here. Function. Right, and as I add the paragraph, I can say, what do we do? We're going to create the paragraph. Let's see. It'd be nice. It would be nice if this add paragraph had arguments, right? So let's see. How about we have arguments that has the X position, maybe the top, maybe the left, the positions of where I want to add the paragraph, and actually not here. And also the content that goes in the paragraph. How's that? Okay. And maybe as a click, this would be maybe a function that calls this add paragraph, right? Calls add paragraph, giving it positions, always the same one, 200, 200, and some dummy content. Okay? Make sense? And what's the paragraph going to do? We're going to create a paragraph, right? Var paragraph. There it is, P, right? What are we going to do? We're going to make it draggable, right? Actually, we're going to set the position so that it's absolute. Position is absolute, right? Absolute. We're going to say that the left is going to be what? Left is going to be the value that we give it. The top is going to be the top that we give it, right? And finally, the HTML content is going to be the content. Okay. Right, so there's the CSS. Here's a paragraph. I change the styling, right? Change the styling, and then I set the content. Everybody okay? Is everybody still with me? Right? I created the paragraph. Then I change its styles to be absolute, and always put it in the center of the page. Yes. Then I set its content. I'm going to make it also draggable. I'm going to make it draggable. I'm going to make it resizable. Okay, so you can move it and put it wherever you want. In draggable, I'll make the grid be 2020. What else? I can put the handles on the resizable, right? I can go into resizable. If I go to resizable, I can put all the handles all around, so I can resize it anywhere from any corner, right? From the top, from the left, as opposed to just the bottom right corner, right? If I go to resizable, let's see. Let's go to resizable. Resizable, and we go to documentation. There's handles. Where are the handles? Handles. There we go. If I want the handles, by default, it's east, south, and southeast, right? So east, south, and the corner southeast. That's the default, right? And have you seen that we can resize it only in those, only in the borders, right? But we can give it all sorts of things. We can say that I want north, I want east, I want south, I want west. So I want all the borders, right? And then I want all the corners, northeast, southeast, southwest, and northwest, right? So I can say handles. Handles. Right, we can give it a string. There we go. Now, let's see if that works. Let's see if this blows up. Run this. So add paragraph. Oh, that didn't work. Let's see. Let's see what it's complaining about. No, it's not no complaints. Add DOM to local storage. Interesting. What happened? What's going on? Add par. That's the class. Add par is click. Let me see if this is even being invoked. Console log hello. Okay, it's calling hello. It is calling hello. And then it's calling add paragraph. Let me see if it's getting here. Hello 2. Refresh. Okay, it's getting there. Let me step through it. We can go to source. We can look at the code here. Add paragraph. Let's click add paragraph. Okay, it goes here. Oh, I know. We never added it, right? We never added it. So here's par. We got the paragraph, but we never added it to the body, right? We never added it to the DOM. Duh. Okay, so let's fix that. Let's go here. So, okay, so I set its position. I made it draggable. I made it resizable. I am going to append it. I'm going to say append to the body. Append to the body. See, let's click. Okay, that looks like it's working. All right, so I can drag it around, right? I can put it wherever I want. Oh, one more thing, right? We're going to make it editable, right? We're going to say content editable equal true. Sorry, English is not my first language. So there we go. So I can move it around. I can add all the content, right? I can move it around and lay out my page any which way I want. So what I want to be able to do is save, right? I want to be able to save this into local storage. So I'm going to make a button here to save, right? So I'm going to make a button here. I'm going to say save. Save. Oops. So save. And when I save, right? When I save, I'm going to have a function. I'm going to say, I'm going to make my event handler here. I'm going to say $, dot save, dot click, right? Function. Oh, I'm going to call a function called save. I'm going to call a function called save. And that function is here. Right? It's going to say function save console. Let's make sure that it is being invoked. Save. Let's see. Let's run it. Where's the console? Is down here. If I click on save, okay, save is being called. Yes. All right. So what do we need to do? Well, we want to save, right? We want to save these things. What do we save? Right. Well, one thing that we could save, right? One thing that we could do is, as we add things to the paragraph, right? We could keep track of a data model, right? Right, like an X position and a Y position, and the content, right? And create an object, maybe an array of objects, an array of paragraphs that we keep track of all these things. Another way that we could do it is that we can get a hold of all the paragraphs, right? Let's get a hold of all the paragraphs. P. What does that do? That grabs all the paragraphs, yes? Right, all the paragraphs. So we can put this var all paragraphs, right? All P's. Right, and I can console log all P's. Right, so if I add, right, and then I add another one, and then I add one more, and I click on save, look what happens here when I click on save. What do we get? We get an array, right? We get an array of what? Of 3 objects in there, right? Here's which are P, right? They're all P's. They have, what else? Let's see, we can open them up, right? And there's a whole bunch of things in there that we might not be interested in. But we can query, what are the things that we would like to have from that paragraph? What do we need? We need its position, right? Its X, Y position. And what else do we need? The content, right? Whatever's inside of it, yes? Right, let's see if we can retrieve that. Well, first of all, we should be able to iterate over these paragraphs, right? How do we iterate over the paragraphs? Let's see. There are 2 ways of iterating over the paragraph. We notice that it's an array. You see that? It is an array. It's an array of 1, 2, well, there's a whole bunch of other things in here that we might not care about. There's 2 ways of iterating. One of the cool ways of iterating is you can say all P's each. That's a jQuery way to iterate over the elements, right? I want to iterate over each one of them. As it's iterating over that array, it will pass us each element at a time, okay? Inside of a function. You'll have the, you'll say the element, Okay, so we can say console log the element. Right, let's clear that. I added 3, save. There they are. Oh wait, what is this? No, I guess not. That's not the element then. I think that's the event. That might be the event. Try it again. There they are. They're the paragraphs. 1, 2, and all the 3 paragraphs, right? You see that? Right? We got the paragraphs, each one of the objects of the paragraphs. So that's the element. We can convert it. Notice that it's a raw paragraph, right? It's not a jQuery paragraph. So we can convert it back into a jQuery paragraph by putting the $sign around it. Now that it's a jQuery object, we can ask it, for instance, we can ask it the HTML that is inside of it. We can say, P, give me your HTML. Remember we used HTML to put HTML in the DOM, right? Over here, we did that, didn't we? Here, right? We said .html to put content inside of the paragraph. So HTML goes both ways. If you give it an argument, it sets the HTML, right? If you don't give it an argument, it reads the HTML. Make sense? Right? So here I'm retrieving the HTML. I'm not going to do console that. I'm going to do console HTML. So I'm going to print the HTML for each one. They're all going to be the same, right? So let's see. Let's add 3 paragraphs. Let's do save. There they are. It printed 4 times dummy content 4 times, right, to the console. Yes? So let's refresh. Let's add a paragraph. Another paragraph. And I can change the content for this one. Right? So this is dummy content 1, 2, 3, and this is dummy content 2, 3, 4. Right? If I save, notice that I have both of them. Right? Dummy content 1, 2, 3, and dummy content 2, 3, 4. Right? So I'm retrieving the HTML for all of these. What else do I need? The positions, right? Where did I put them in the page? Yes? We can retrieve that with position. We can say var position. We can say paragraph, give me your position. Right? And we can do console log the position. The position is going to give me 2 things, left and top. Measure from left and measure from top. Okay? Let's print that. Let's print that. So let's do that. Let's add paragraph. Let's say save. There it is. For each one, it tells me that one was at 180 and 60 and the other was 102 and 240. Yes? So I have enough information, right, to create something, right, a data model to store in local storage. Yes? Let's do that. All right. As I'm iterating, I'm going to create my object. My object. What's my object going to be? My object is going to contain one of the attributes is the HTML. I'm going to call it HTML. What's the value? The HTML value that I retrieved, right? I retrieved the HTML, and also I'm going to have the top is inside of the position dot top, and the left is going to be the position dot left, right? Because notice that the position object has 2 attributes, top and left. Okay, so that's the object I would like to put in the location, but it's not only one. There's a whole bunch of them, right? There could be several paragraphs. So I need to put this in an array, right? I need to put it in an array. So let's put it here. Let's create an array with, say, var p's. It's an array, right? Paragraphs, which is initially empty. And what I'm going to do is add these elements to the array, right? So I can say ps push adds an element to an array. So I'll say the object. There it is, my object. I added it, right? And then at the end, I'm just going to console print it to make sure that that indeed is what I want to store, right? PS. Let me remove all these other consoles because it'll be hard to read. Anything else? Okay. Let's try this. So add the paragraph. So here's a dummy content 1, 2, 3, and dummy content 2, 3, 4. Right, 2, 3, 4. I'm going to save. There it is. It's an array of 2 objects. You see that? It's an array of 2 objects. If I open it up, I have 2 objects in there. The first one says dummy content 1, 2, 3. Top is 20. Top is 140. Left is 20. And the other one is dummy content 2, 3, 4, 60 and 220. You see that? Right? I want to put it in local storage, right? So how to put it in local storage? I first have to convert it into a string, right? And then I can put it in local storage. So let's do that. So we'll say var ps as a string is, I'm going to do json.stringify. I give it the ps, and then I'm going to print it. I'm going to print it, to make sure that that is indeed what I want to store. Let's try it again. Add paragraph. That's 2, 3, 4, and this is 4, 5, 6. Save. There it is. That's the string representation of the entire array containing 2 objects. You see that? Right? Okay. So I'm just going to put, now that it's a string, I'm okay to store it in local storage. I'm going to say local storage dot set item. And I'm going to put it in a element called page. Right? There's a page that I'm saving. And I'm going to store this string. Okay? Everybody okay? That means that, okay, so it's there, right? Okay, so I'm going to refresh, try it again. So there's content, whatever. And this is something else. Save. Presumably that has been stored into local storage. Yes, hopefully. I think so. Let's make sure. Maybe I want a button that loads, right? That loads the page. Load the page. Right? That and we can create an event handler that says for load, call a method called load. And what does load do? Load, what does it do? It reads from local storage, right? Right. So we're going to say var the page as a string is local storage get item, right? What did I call it? Page? Is that what I called it? Page, right? Page. And I'm just going to console log page str. Right? Let's load it. There it is. That's the string. You see that? That's exactly the string, right? Okay. Let's convert it into an object. Well, in this case, an array, right? Var page. Let's convert it into an array. So we're going to parse it. We're going to parse the page string, right? And we're going to print it. Page. Refresh, load. That's the object. That's the original array that we put in there, isn't it? Right? With the dummy content, the left, the top, everything, right? Correct? What's left to do is to iterate over that array, right? And add each one of these paragraphs, right? So we're going to iterate over this array. So we're going to say for var in page. So we're going to get the paragraph, each one of the paragraphs. So paragraphs, we're going to say page sub I, right? So now I have each one of the paragraphs. I have the HTML. It's going to be paragraph.html. The top is going to be par.top, and var left will be par.left, right? So I have all the information to be able to recreate the paragraph, yes? Right? And I have a method to add paragraphs with these arguments, isn't it? Right? So we can call add paragraph that takes arguments top, left, and HTML. Right? And it makes, so let's try that. Let's refresh and let's load. There they are. Those are the original, right? The original paragraphs that we had created, right? And we can now type whatever we want, okay, in here, right, and create actual content, right, where we can resize this. Actually, we can resize from this. Oh, I didn't turn on. I thought I had turned on the. the ability to resize from everywhere. Why are you not letting me resize you? Guru. Okay, so a lot of content. Well, I know. I'm going to resize you first. Why are you not resizing? I did make it resizable, didn't I? Well, it uses add paragraph, right? Add paragraph. Add paragraph. Yeah, it makes it resizable. Not sure. Anyway, right? I can edit and my edits, any new edit that I make, right? And I save it. When I refresh, it's not there, but when I load it, everything comes back, right? So I can keep editing. So imagine that this is the start of the next, Google Docs, right? Where I can store, I can save, I can do all sorts of things. Obviously, it would not store locally. It would store in the database, right? It would send the object to the database. The database would store it in some record, right? Which we can then later on load those documents. Yes. It's a new attribute. It's a new attribute in HTML5. Content editable equal true. Okay. Ideally, you would do this maybe with a text editor, obviously, right? That has all sorts of WYSIWYGs and make things bold and actually that still works, right? Right. You have some simple, formatting of the text, right? Copy paste works. Copy paste works, right? In content editable, right? So the beginnings of a content management system. All right. Okay, I'm gonna leave it up to here. Let me stop here.